So the way we will be exploring all of these resources throughout the course of the semester is looking at, as we do so much in law school, a hypothetical. So I'll be using the one hypothetical, and we will use that to see how it works throughout the different resources across the semester so that you can see how they work together and relate and how you might explore a particular issue. This is a fairly complex, involved issue. So this may not be necessarily representative of the type of issue that you'll always be researching. Sometimes you just have a quick and dirty research you need to do. And we'll talk about the differences and how you approach those different types. So for now, let's take a look at our issue and hypothetical. So I am a new client. I walk into your office. It's always a good thing to have a client walking into your office. I live and work in New York, and I work for a private university in New York. I was born with a heart defect, and I wanted to go to a cardiologist for preventative care to make sure everything was okay. My health insurance that I get through my employer, standard these days, is an HMO, and that HMO denied coverage. Cardiologists are really expensive, and they don't want to cover anything that they don't think is really necessary. So I didn't get covered by the cardiologist, so I didn't go, and 6 months later, I had a heart attack. This actually is not true, by the way. This is a hypothetical. It's about 6 months later, I had a heart attack. And it turns out the symptoms could have been detected by a cardiologist. So I want to sue that health plan, my health plan, the HMO, for denying me care. So your supervisor wants to get a sense of, do we have a case? Should we take this on? Is this worth our time? Okay. So what's the first thing you're going to do? Emma? Start with Google. That's almost a good place to start.
Yeah, I know what HMO is.
Find
I know what an HMO is.
So you want to learn more about HMOs. Okay, so do some factual research, Google search. Anybody else?
Secondary resources.
Start with secondary resources online. Okay. Jurisdiction. Actually, the answer to that is New York. But yes, you absolutely want to know the jurisdiction. Do some more factual investigation. Definitely see the policy. Okay, so you all are skirting around, especially for so follow-up question for those of you who are searching secondary sources, Google. How do you know what to type in? Right, you have to type in something, Alexis, or to Google. What are you going to do to figure that out? So first step.
This is assuming after you interview the client, or
after you interview the client. So I have just given you the client interview. You need to figure out what it is you need to research. We've come up with some good questions already, but it's just been sort of individual questions. So you may remember from first year, or you may not. You will just want to sit down and think about, what is the issue? This is classic. What do you do in a law school exam? You have an issue spotting question, right? The reason for that is when you're practicing, you need to figure out, before you sit down in front of Lexis or Google or secondary sources or wherever, you need to figure out, what is it I'm researching? And you want to ask some of the very excellent basic questions that have already come up. So we already talked about where, and I already answered that question. The answer is New York. So here I have in this particular spreadsheet one way of doing issue spotting. there are lots of different rubrics or questions you can ask yourself. Sometimes it's people, place, things. I do this because I remember it, because it's the classic journalistic questions, and they're all W's that I can remember. Whatever works for you is the answer as to what's the best way to do this. So this is what works best to me. So we have the questions: who, what, where, when, why, how. It's kind of the same question, and those equating to legal theories. So let's go through that. Who are we talking about?
An employee.
Okay, employee. So now one thing you want to start to think about as you do this issue spotting is that research thinking theme I talked about. Is employee the relevant identification for our issue? You may not know the answer to that yet, but you always want to be thinking about that as you put the terms in. So who are we talking about who are relevant to help us determine if we want this client? Who's your client? She's an employee. Insured person. Insured person. Who else are we talking about? New York residents. Just okay. So a couple of hands just shot out.
Private university.
Okay. Oops. Terrible typist. University. Cardiologist. You're missing. Who do we want to sue? The insurance company, exactly. Also known as the HMO. We have to figure out what an HMO is all about. HMO/insurance company. Okay, so again, that research thinking, who of this list, if you're going to put finger to keyboard, what do you think is the most important or top two? So insured. Okay, so insurance company, HMO. Okay, so what happened, or what is it that sometimes you have to do research to avoid something from happening, or you want something to happen? So what are we talking about? What happened? Refuse denial of coverage. Okay. What happened? What happened to your client?
You were injured as a result of
Injured / heart attack. Anything else? As we go through this, you don't have to do it in order. I'm just doing it in order because it's just natural that way. But if other ideas come up, you're allowed to fill in other columns. You can come back, obviously. So if you think more what, just raise your hand or shout out. The where, we've already determined is New York. The when. Now I mentioned 6 months ago. In case you missed it, you don't have it in front of you, so I'm not going to make you guess what I said. Why are we worried about the when? Statute of limitations. Exactly. So unlikely we have to worry about something happening 6 months ago, but you sort of want to keep that in the middle of your mind. If she doesn't, if you have a client with this problem who walks into your door and it happened 5 years ago. Excuse me. Okay, and now the all important why. Why does she think she needs a lawyer? How can you help as a lawyer? What are our legal theories? Answer any or all of those questions. Your client's going to sue an HMO on what basis? Guesses are good.
They should have provided coverage and they didn't.
Did not provide coverage they should have. Okay.
Maybe on negligence theory.
Negligence theory. Negligence based on
They had a duty to provide this basic type of coverage and they didn't.
to provide coverage. She's still alive. But maybe something not quite, she's still alive, but what's a, so, okay.
Maybe loss of wage. Is that what,
So damages might be loss of wages. Anything else I saw? Did I see? Luke? Issued depending upon policy language. Andrew, I think it was you who mentioned you wanted to take a closer look at the policy. Absolutely. Okay, so we do all of this to start our legal thinking because we have to think about what is it we're going to research. So out of all of this, what words, we talked about starting maybe in Google, starting maybe in secondary sources, what words are your fingers going to type into the keyboard? This is probably one of the hardest parts of research, is this very beginning. You don't really have a sense of where you're going. Okay, so you're going very broad, health regulation in New York. Think about, and again, this is that research. Think about, okay, if I were to search health regulation in New York, either on Google or secondary sources, what would I get back? You would get back, right, a whole lot of, what about smoking or poison or anything relating to health, regulations for doctors, nurses, hospitals, whole lots of stuff. So part of this research thinking concept is thinking about, okay, these are the terms I'm going to put in. What's likely to come back? Any other thoughts? Yeah, I'm sorry.
Denial of coverage of HMO coverage.
Denial HMO coverage. Okay.
Insurance company, denial coverage.
Negligence, insurance company. I might at least start more specifically with HMO because we don't know much about HMOs yet. We need to do more research, but we know it's an HMO. It may be that we're getting too specific and we want to go broader with health insurance, but always best to go with your particular facts and circumstances first and then broaden only if you have to. So one tool I use sometimes is I think about, okay, if I were to go back to first year, maybe first year, a little bit of second year, what course would this come under? Maybe contracts. We talked about contracts. What else? Towards. Okay. So that will help us as we think about tools that we're going to look at. So for instance, even though we're talking about an employee, is this an employment law issue? Anybody who thinks it's an employment law issue? Who thinks it's not an employment law issue? Okay. So again, figuring out where it comes under and where it definitely doesn't, even though the words might suggest. Okay. So let's go. And so we have a couple of possible first steps. So we've now done our issue spotting. We have some idea of search terms. Now it's time to put finger to keyboard. Couple of suggestions. We have secondary sources as one suggestion. We have Google as another suggestion. I'm going to start with Google because, frankly, I know that's where you all are going to start. And, frankly, that's not a bad idea. The thing with Google, and I will hopefully say this at least 100 times this semester, preferably 200 or 500 times, just don't stop there. Even for quick and dirty, Google is great, but just a plain old vanilla Google search. Now, there's some advanced searches I'll show you in a little while and throughout the semester. Plain old vanilla Google search is great to get started, but think about it. If you could rely on a plain old vanilla Google search, why would anybody have to hire you? Right? Google's going to get you only so far. So let's go into Google. And actually my search bar up there. And so we had HMO denial of coverage, right? Okay. I'm just going to go quickly, and Google does this wonderful highlight the first link up top. 5 reasons. So I haven't seen this site before because obviously we just generated this search here. 5 reasons your health insurance plan will deny your medical claim. So having is enough to make you feel sick. And so here it's giving us a basics about how this works. So Andrea, you were interested in a little more information about HMO. So this will be a good, and rightfully so if you're not familiar. So this is a good place to start, just to get some factual basis to understand this area, which you may or may not know much about. So after you get some of that background, what you then might want to try again as a basic Google search. And the reason I say Google, one of the many reasons I see Google is a good place to start, just never stop there, get this nice basic information. Also, it's free and easy. Again, we'll be talking about cost efficiency in a little while, and the extra credits about that as well. I wouldn't spend hours and hours on Google because that's no longer time efficient. So another way I would take advantage of Google, again, without spending a whole lot of time, is bringing in that legal aspect. So again, it's that research thinking, and sometimes you won't know in advance what you're going to get, right? I didn't know what we were going to get, HMO, denial of treatment. But what I might also want to try is, again, a more legal-based search. So here we have a search, HMO liability. Because again, think about that research thinking, about the terminology that you want to use. We have a legal question. What is it that ultimately we want to do? Ideally, our client wants us to hold the HMO liable. Now, these aren't magic words. You didn't have to just come up with these words and nothing else and to get the right answer. This is just one example of what I mean by research thinking and bringing in the more legal aspect of our question, which ultimately is what you need to resolve as your client's lawyer. And again, as we see, Google, comes up with its first hit, which we always like to look at, right? HMO malpractice liability. So now Google has already taught us something. We didn't really think about malpractice, right? But maybe that could be interesting. We don't know yet, but we're going to make a mental note, jot it down, check out malpractice. And here's HMO malpractice liability lawyers legal match. Don't know what that is? Let's go take a look. And so legal match. So up here, no fee to present your case. Choose from lawyers in your area, 100% confidential service. This is basically helping people, the general public, to find lawyers, and they give you some general public information on HMO malpractice liability lawyers. So basically, they're trying to get clients. But let's see what it can tell us. So what is HMO liability? So Andrea, we get some background. HMO liability refers to holding a health maintenance organization or managed care organization. And I'm going through this really quickly, but another part of research thinking is learning from your research. This site, I can tell you, because I've looked at it before, is not going to give you the entire answer and we can all go home, unfortunately. This site will give you some of those little clues in our detective hunt. And one of those little clues might be just some terminology. Remember, we were just spending all this time doing issue spotting, figuring out what words to type in. The terminology, the words we type in, are critical. So we already know about HMO, which stands for Health Maintenance Organization. You might not have known that beforehand, but now we know. Or managed care. So another phrase that expresses that type of organization that provides health insurance, managed care organization. And here it talks about delay or denial of tests. We've already talked a little bit about these concepts, delay or denial of treatment. When can an HMO be held liable for malpractice? So it talks about the laws regarding HMO can be liable vary state to state. So we have to be worried about state law. While some states hold HMOs liable when they commit malpractice, again, that malpractice idea, other states tend to say that the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, ERISA, prevents patients from suing an HMO for malpractice. So we've now found a whole bunch of leads. We want to think about malpractice. We know we probably need to investigate state law. And then there's this whole ERISA Act. Many states, corporate entities must go through mandatory arbitration. So we don't know where New York falls in all this. We don't know what this ERISA is, but we now have a bunch of clues that we now, as a detective, as Sherlock, need to follow up on. But there's still one other thing I want to think about. So I've learned something from this site. Am I going to rely on its information as true? I see some heads, see some skepticism. Why not? I'll leave that question open for the moment. Let's take a look at our next site. So this next site, www.Gilman, I'm not going to try to pronounce that, but it's a name. And as we go there, we see it's a law firm. It's a law firm of trial attorneys. And it's giving us more information about health maintenance organizations. What is an HMO? Some more background. So medical malpractice in HMOs, notorious difficult to sue. Most states have ruled that HMOs are covered by ERISA again. Meaning HMOs are covered under federal law. So we now know ERISA is a federal law. If we hadn't surmised that before, some states make rules. So again, states differ. Although difficult, patients can sue HMOs if they were denied medical care or medications. So we have a law firm saying, okay, maybe we can sue since we were denied medical care. And we have this legal match site suggesting possibilities for suing. These are both sites, law firm, legal match, that are businesses, right? Law firm's a business, Legal Match is a client referral service business. They are trying to get business. You absolutely have to think about where your information is coming from when you are using Google. Law firm wants client. They're seeming to suggest that maybe we have a good case. But bear in mind, they're trial attorneys. They want clients, right? They're trying to get your business. I'm not saying they're lying. They're committing malpractice or anything like that. They're just presenting their best business case. Likewise, the Legal Match. They're trying to match clients. They probably get fees from the law firms if they refer clients. So they're also trying to generate business. You need to look at anything you find on Google with a critical, skeptical eye. So to that end, and you need to look at anything on the web with a critical, skeptical eye. So to that end, I am, as promised, going to play a video. Here is a very young Stephen Colbert back in the day when he had his own, well, he has his own show now, but this was just after his Daily Show stint. So anyway, it's a few minutes, and it makes the point so well that I just can't resist showing that. It's a little bit old, so it's going to refer to some very old events back from over like 15 years ago. But anyway. Okay. So Wikipedia no longer is quite as open. You actually now need to register as a Wikipedia editor, but it's actually not, as I understand it, it's not that difficult. I've never tried. So a few points there. Obviously being, don't trust what's on the web. Wikipedia is relatively easy even now to edit. So if you're looking at Wikipedia, understand you need to be skeptical. Another point, I don't even know if the term existed back when this episode aired many years ago, but the whole idea of fake news is coming through there. And again, that idea of being critical of what information you're looking at, especially when it's coming from an unvetted source like Google, like the web. Another example of that would be Facebook. How many of you are Facebook users? Okay, so fewer each year. Looks like just about half. So that's one avenue for disseminating fake news. Any Twitter users? A couple of Twitter users. So again, certainly not saying don't use them, just read them with some critical skepticism. And be aware of what you're relying on, most especially when you are working in your role as attorneys. So obviously what you do personally is entirely up to you. Okay, so let's think a little bit more about this with our very first exercise. I am going to ask you to take a look at a couple of different web pages and to evaluate them. You will find the link to these web pages on the course website under modules. It logged me out. Come on. So under modules, under our intro and course documents, class 1 workshop. If you have not registered yet, I have a couple of copies of the web address. So I will pass this around for whoever might need it. And that web address or the link here on the course website will bring you to this workshop, Evaluating Information. And I'm going to ask you, so there are two different websites, Site 1, and if you scroll down here, Site 2, I'm going to ask you to copy and paste that website into a separate tab. Take a look at that website and evaluate it. So, and by that, I mean evaluate the trustworthiness of each site as a source of information about bullying. Both sites are about bullying. interested in your take. You can stay on the page, go out to another website, anything that you would normally do. Have about 10 minutes to do that. If you have trouble getting to the link or the site, speak up, wave at me, do something so I can come around and help you out. Or any other questions? Pretty good in finding the site? Is going well with the technology. We see 20 responses. Gotta love it. Okay, so let's see what the sense of the group is. So site number 1, the college site, the college speaks. So 61% of you, so not quite 2/3, would rely on the information. And let's see why. So one person who would not rely, site does not look like it is for a real organization. Looked pretty legit. I looked at the page and scanned a little about who they are. It appears they are actual doctors. Not consider use this site because site is for pediatrician using comics. Right off the bat, I saw that this was a subjective article. Found the site to be credible. This website, American College, .org. So there is a reason, not HTML or .com. Okay. Structured is respectable. Website member login. .org. Another person was impressed with the .org. References the site had provided were sources that included reference journals. Okay, so someone was impressed with the fact that they refer to journals. Site with a page specific information on bullying. The author of the page is a doctor. Includes references where the author extracted. Not, I'm presuming this person meant not well organized. Okay, so more likely consider as a primary source for me because the information contained has relevance to his work and it relayed on many other sites. So I'm guessing you mean refer to other sites. I consider the kind of organization entity that owns the site. More important was the deference to researchers. So again, a lot of people seem to be impressed by the fact that it referred to other researchers, that it's a .org. Here's another .org, that the author is a doctor. Again, citing to other sites. Okay, Ryan information, homepage, a national organization, healthcare professionals. Utilizes footnotes, so again the idea of references. Not for profit. Appear to be reliable with some mix. Okay, so general trustworthy nonprofit again. Okay, a lot of facts. All right, so that is site number 1. Site number 2, so that was the college. Site number 2 is the academy. Slightly more, a little bit more than 2/3, somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4. And again, site looks official. Does not seem as professional, so someone less impressed with it. A little more information, similar. So also a .org, the title, a little more skeptical because of its structure. Okay, so structure .org, somebody looked at the About section and saw the information on the AAP, which included Board of Directors meetings. So the founding organization AAP is nonprofit. So again, so we seem to have a theme of nonprofit, a theme of .org, at least in the first one, theme of references. Although, here's one that all the article does not cite scholarly articles, looks like a press release for a symposium, still quotes experts, so referring references. much more transparent in their membership and objectives of the group, allocation of funding, financial, overall information the group provides is more defined and accessible. Okay. Again, .org seems to be important. Not contain author references. Website fact session trustworthy means that it cooperates. Purpose, considering determination, look to see the source of the website and the purpose of the website in their facts section. Okay, so looked about the about the organization, seemed very formal, composed, discusses, so the content, so looking at the content, American, so somebody investigating the organization. Okay. So interesting a little bit more. Basically, so we have references, we have .org, structure was of interest, including facts of interest, seem to be the basis of some of your analysis. So that's okay. So if you had to say which website was more reliable, so slightly more than half like the Academy, found the Academy more reliable. Only a third of you thought the college was more reliable, and a handful of you were undecided. Okay, so the reason for this workshop and my going through in some detail your responses is that this workshop is based entirely on this article. This article, there's a link to this on the course website if you decide you're interested in reading it. It's a fascinating read if this idea of web reliability is of any interest to you. And what these folks do, these are actually history researchers, and what they did is they took a bunch of different groups of people and had them look at websites. So they actually did 3 different studies. What you all did was their first one comparing the 2 websites you looked at. They did a couple of other studies looking at different websites, also asking about reliability. So let's take a look at the description of the sites as the authors of this article described it. So they had their participants evaluate articles about bullying at the 2 websites, the Academy, which was site number 2 for you, and the College of Pediatricians, which is site number 1 for you. Despite the similarity in names, and I'm going to read this, I know you all can read, I'm going to read this in case it's a little bit fuzzy for you on the screen. Despite the similarity in names, 2 organizations couldn't be more different. The Academy, established in 1932, is the largest professional organization of pediatricians in the world with 64,000 members. The college is a splinter group that in 2002 broke from its parent organization over the issue of adoption by same-sex couples. It is estimated to have between 200 and 500 members, so significantly smaller. The college, the group, has come under withering criticism, I'm reading directly here, for its virulently, I have trouble with that word, anti-gay stance, its advocacy of reparative therapy, in quotes, currently outlawed for minors in 9 U.S. states, and incendiary posts. One of those posts advocates adding P for pedophile to the acronym LGBT, since pedophilia is, in quotes again, intrinsically woven into their agenda. So the college site apparently presenting a very definitive point of view of a splinter group with some highly questionable ideas, shall we say? Okay. So, as I said, these researchers tested groups like yourselves. Actually, they tested groups of fact checkers, people who check facts for a living. They tested historians, PhDs, like themselves, so highly educated people, and they tested students. Actually, I believe they were juniors and seniors in colleges, so slightly younger than you, but not too much so. So the fact checkers, and again, the print may be a little small for you to read, so 100% of the fact checkers chose the Academy as more reliable. So they found the more reliable organization, the non-biased, questionable organization. Interestingly, though, only 50% of the historians, 50% of people with PhD, highly educated folks, found the academy to be more reliable. 40% of them just weren't sure, and 10% of them chose the questionable group, the college. Of the students, only 20% of the students found the academy more reliable. 64% of the students went for the college, and 16% were undecided. Okay, so what were some of the bases? These fact checkers were 100% on the mark. How did they evaluate websites? So jumping a little bit in the article, here's an example of a bunch of different fact checkers' comments. One factor, I immediately wanted to know more about the college, so I'm going to go to the About Us section, says one fact checker. Another fact checker says, so I might open another tab just to read a little bit more about the different organizations. So it's kind of hard to tell how mainstream the organization is, referring to the college. That fact checker was. So looking a little bit more in depth as to what these fact checkers did. So things to think about as we evaluate websites. So one fact checker said, the first thing I would do is see if I can find anything on the organization. He said as he typed the organization's name into Google. He clicked on Wikipedia's entry about the college and read that it is a, in quotes, socially conservative association of pediatricians founded in 2002 as a protest against the American Academy's support for adoption by gay couples. So this fact checker went outside of the document, what these authors call lateral reading, that's the name of the article, went outside the document to check out what this organization was all about. They just had never heard of it and didn't know about it. Okay, so a lot of the students in this study went for the college, 60-something%, if I recall the number correctly. What did they do? Where might they have gotten a little bit off what they might have done to evaluate? So what these researchers found were that college students rarely considered where information came from when evaluating reliability. They go on to say young people are more likely to judge a website based on its relevance to their searching needs. So interestingly, these college students didn't really think about reliability. They thought about, did this have information on my topic, whether or not it's reliable? And that's an easy mistake to make. You want to find the information, but you need in your brain to have in that mindfulness, it's a big term these days, in that middle level of your brain, did I rely on this or not? They go on, our authors, to say, so the students judge based on the relevance of their searching needs, its appearance, just how good does it look, or how easy it is to navigate. Which you can kind of sympathize with the students, right? If it's easier to use, then you're going to like it more, right? If it looks nice, you're going to like it more, right? It makes sense. I'm not trying to be mean to these students, but again, they're thinking about factors that don't affect whether the information they're relying on is accurate. Little bit more detail on what some of those students thought about. So one of these students saw an abstract and they thought that impressed them as to reliability. Another student, as I just mentioned, really liked how it's laid out. Bullet points are always easier to look through, which I happen to agree with entirely. But again, a different analysis than is this reliable? That's whether you like it or not. Just provides more information. So just quantity of information. Again, that is quantity of information can be a good thing, but again, doesn't speak to how accurate, how reliable it is. Another student, I enjoy the interface of the college website. I can automatically see this source and trust it because of how official it looks. Again, just based on just appearance. Don't worry about the different colors. It's just my computer. Okay, so those were the experts, the fact checkers who really pegged it and got it right. Those are the students who didn't do nearly as well. Let's take a look at the historians, the kind of in the middle. Some of them got it, some of them didn't. And also obviously very smart people, highly educated. Historians were often taken by the college's name and logo. It's .org domain. A few of you mentioned that. Its layout and aesthetics, kind of like the students, and its scientific appearance complete with abstract references and articles authored by medical doctors. Reading the Bullying at School article, historian M commented on the presence of scientific abstract and references. And I have to tell you, and several of you mentioned that, I look at website evaluation from fellow law librarians, because obviously this is an important issue and we teach it. And some of the lists that I see from fellow law librarians talk about references and footnotes and using well-credentialed people like or authors like doctors. So it's really easy to get fooled or convinced that, oh, this is reliable because somebody's referring to a scholarly article. Think about it. You can pick and choose any bit of a scholarly article to make an argument, right? Even if you could be misrepresenting that scholarly article or not even misrepresenting, just picking out particular aspects of it. So that could be pretty misleading in judging whether a site is reliable if they've got footnotes, or they could just make up footnotes. Not that I'm saying anybody did that, but they could just make up footnotes to make it look more reliable. More detail about some of the what the historians judge, basis of their judgment. So here, one feature played a key role in shaping historians' judgment, the presence of references at the bottom of the college's entries. 7 of 10 historians explicitly commented on them. So I just talked about that, and apparently 70% of the historians thought that was important. And again, we see references to scientific literature, citing real journals. So to go back now to what the authors recommend, and I also recommend what they call the lateral reading process. So this is a diagram from one of the different studies they did from a different website, but it applies, I think, generally to any kind of evaluation. So the historians asked, So the authors, who are historians, asked a different group to look at a different web page called minimumwage.com. So let's see if I had it pulled up. Let's see if I can pull that up quickly. Minimumwage.com. That's not the right website, so I'm not viewing that correctly. Looks like that says minimumage.com. Nope. All right. I'll try one more time and then give up if I can't. It is minimumwage.com. This is why I like to open tabs ahead of time, but since I accidentally closed them, I need to ask your indulgence while I get through here. Okay. You know what they did? They changed the graphic from this morning. That's why I didn't recognize it. How quickly websites change. So this is the right site. Okay, so the second study that the graphic I'll go back to in a moment referred to is this particular website. And what the authors are suggesting is this lateral reading process. Let's get back there. Starts at that page, and where they suggest you might start is take a look at the About page. Find out about the organization. So here on minimumwage.com, we go to About. And it tells us that this is a project of the Employment Policies Institute. Okay, I don't know about you, I've never heard about that. about them. So our authors suggest, okay, so that brings us to EP Online, Employment Policies Institute online homepage. Take a look at their About Us page. So going to their webpage, we take a look at their About page, and you want to scan through it first. So they're talking about lots of different aspects about establishing or increasing the minimum wage. Looking at the About Us, it's a nonprofit research organization. So some of you who are relying on nonprofit, it's also a .org. It talks about Michael Saltzman, the managing director, and who he is. Excuse me. So here's where the standard practice of the historians in our group, the historian group in our example, and the students didn't do, but what the fact checkers did do, and what our authors are recommending, and I'm recommending as well, is this is where you go outside of the page. You do that lateral reading and Google the EPI. So if we Google the Employment Policies Institute, and then not only take a look at their page, but see what some of the other results are. So here they have a Wikipedia page. Again, could look at it. I wouldn't necessarily take it as absolute truth. Here's another site called sourcewatch.org. And even if you haven't heard of it, might be worth taking a look. Here's a New York Times site. You have heard of the New York Times. See what this article, and even just reading the little blurb underneath the Google search, it says, actually, you don't see so much of the New York Times site, but in the SourceWatch site, you say EPI is one of several front groups created by Berman and Company, a Washington, D.C. public affairs firm. And if we go to that SourceWatch, kind of looks like Wikipedia, so this public affairs firm who lobbies for the restaurant, hotel, alcoholic beverage, and tobacco industries. So it's a lobbyist group. It's a lobbyist group for business. And if you think about it, a lobbyist group for business probably is against raising the minimum wage, especially think about restaurants. They have minimum wage workers. So now the only way to discover that this particular group, who's the author of this page, has a particular point of view is by going outside of the website, doing that lateral reading, doing a Google search, and investigating who they are from another source. And going down, I see that actually this particular website, this SourceWatch, refers to that New York Times article, the one actually that comes in our Google results, as well as an NPR interview. So I might try to Google for that NPR if I wanted that NPR interview if I wanted information. So back to our graphic here. So we want to go outside our document, do some investigation of the responsible organization, and take a look at those results, finally finding a source that we can rely on, whether it's NPR, New York Times, if you're familiar with SourceWatch, to get a sense of who these people are. Even looking at Wikipedia, because they'll give you some background as well and give you those references to help you find these more reliable sources. Okay, let's go. Any questions? So I hope you have a sense of how you might want to evaluate some of your Google search results. Going back to our Google search here, we left it at our law firm. So I was suggesting one thing you want to think about in evaluating Google search results is just what's the interest of the organization. We can identify our law firm and our legal match site pretty easily without doing too much work. They're looking for clients. So yes, we're going to read it. I'm not suggesting don't ever look at law firm sites. That wouldn't be a good idea. They gave us some good things to think about. But that's really how you want, when you are looking at these questionable sites, it's to give you terminology to think about, give you possible issues, those little are detective clues that you may want to investigate further. So in looking at these sites, we did learn a lot. We learned what HMO stands for. We learned the phrase managed care might be of interest. We learned about ERISA. We're definitely going to have to check out ERISA. We learned malpractice. We hadn't really thought about that aspect of our issue, but now we probably do. So all these sites helped us, but we're not going to rely on them and say, okay, we're done. Yes, we can sue, or okay, yes, no, we shouldn't sue. We just have the first couple of clues in our detective hunt. Okay. Any questions about so let's look briefly just to see one other type of resource, a couple other types of resources we find. So here we see a .gov site, so a government site that we could think is more reliable, but notice it says CT.gov. And if you know anything about reading website addresses, that means it's from Connecticut. If you didn't know anything, you click on it, you'd see it's from Connecticut. So not really going to be of interest, since if anything, we're interested in New York State. And we're still not sure if this is federal, state, possibly both, but we know we're definitely not interested in Connecticut. Here's another .gov. So NCBI, NIM, NIH.gov. You may or may not know NIH is National Institute of Health. If you don't know, it's still worth clicking on. It says HMO liability. And this is what I ran into earlier. So this happens. So we will look at an NIH site in just a moment. That one, as we saw, it didn't come up. That's going to happen. Another strategy in Google searching, and again, we're spending quite a lot of time at it. I don't recommend you spending hours and hours at Google searching, but it's free and it's easy, right? So add some of the terminology we talked about. So we talked about denial of care, denial of treatment. So add that and see if that gives us anything else worth looking at. So again, here we see injuryclaimcoach.com, malpractice settlements. I can surmise from that this is another site trying to get business for litigation. Still, all the reasons might be worth looking at to learn from, but again, I'm not going to rely on this one, Fuchsberg.com, probably another law firm. I think that's the one we looked at. Here's an article from the New York Times. So just going through and quickly making a judgment. Don't know what this defraudingamerica.com is. Again, might look at it to see if it helps me any. But here's another NIH.gov site. Health Plan Liability and ERISA. Ooh, there's that ERISA again. I know I need to know more about this. So again, .gov should be reliable. So it tells us the ERISA supersedes state laws as they relate to employer-based health care plans. Thus, cases brought under ERISA are heard in federal courts. We examine the intent and scope. So it gives us some background on the U.S. healthcare industry. So several of you mentioned you want to know more about HMOs. And so here's some background on health plan liability. Two types of liability, contract and tort. Just what we were talking about. If we hadn't come up with that in our issue spotting, here's some help for us. Contracts. So this is obviously geared, this site is obviously geared toward non-lawyers, is explaining what a contract is, so obviously not helpful for us, but gives us something about malpractice claims. And now we get some basis on ERISA, which we may not know a whole lot about, which might be useful. So it talks about ERISA uniform rules and ERISA provisions supersede any and all state laws. The fact that ERISA preempts not only state laws that conflict with ERISA, but also state laws that relate to employee benefit plans. So we have to worry about this superseding state laws and preempting. So another thing we might want to think about as we figure out whether we can sue, and if we can, if it's only in federal court, or can we sue in state court? Do we want to sue in state court? So more information about ERISA. And then it goes on to talk about case law. So now we're getting some references to primary authority. And we'll talk more about the difference in our next class. So we're getting references to different cases that we may want to make note of. Okay, any questions about Google searching? So we have done our first step. We're never going to stop there. But our first step in Google searching, we've learned a lot. We now have probably more questions than we have answers, but in the beginning stage of research, that's especially an involved issue like this one, that's pretty common. Okay, let's talk a little bit about costs. I've been promising you throughout the whole class, so let's dive in. Obviously, you don't have to worry about costs with Google. That's one of the big advantages. You do need to worry about costs with Lexis and Westlaw, but not Bloomberg. I know none of you have used Bloomberg yet, but Bloomberg is basically a database that charges anybody who subscribes a flat fee. You pay one fee and you can search 24/7 and you're done. So it's actually one advantage of Bloomberg if you subscribe to Bloomberg, is you don't have to worry about how much you search. Not so for Lexis and Westlaw. For Lexis and Westlaw, it's an incredibly complex calculation. It is not the same for any two institutions. It's not even the same for any two law schools. In law schools, it's based on what's called our FTE, basically how many students we have. And so the law library actually pays Lexis and Westlaw big sums of dollars so that you all can search to your heart's content. 24/7, you don't really think about limits. The reason Lexis and Westlaw do that is you like their service better. So that way, when you go out and practice, you talk to your managing partner, or if you're lucky enough to be in an organization with a librarian, yes, I am biased, you talk to the librarian and you say, Lexis is great, we need Lexis. Or, oh God, Lex, I can't do Lexis, we need Westlaw. Or how about both? Not too many organizations have both. Huge firms will tend to, but small to mid-sized firms and other organizations, public interest organizations, will probably only have one. Which is why you want to be as proficient as you can in both. Because you may or may not know where you're going to be working full-time after you graduate. I know some of you know where you'll be for the summer. I don't know if any of you know where you'll be full-time. But even if you do, it could change. My brother is an attorney. He used to be the managing partner for a small firm. Now he's solo, but his small firm was, I don't know, about 12 to 15 attorneys, I think, at their height. And he was managing partner. And my brother, being who my brother is, he would look for the best deal. So every few years or so, they'd be with Lexis for a while. And then every few years ago, Lexis would hike the price and he'd say, this is a lot of money. So he'd talk to Westlaw and Westlaw would give them a better deal. So he'd switch to Westlaw, which meant everybody in the firm, all 15 attorneys, needed to know how to use Westlaw. And a few years would pass and Westlaw would get real expensive again and he'd switch back to Lexis. And so everybody would have to relearn Lexis. So you might wind up in a firm with a crazy person like my brother who switches back and forth. Or as I said, you may not know where you're going to wind up. So you want to be as proficient as you can at both, and that's one of our goals for the course. So in terms of understanding how they are priced, first let's take a quick look at Westlaw. So here, and you have a handout on which this site is based. So basically the way it works for Lexis and Westlaw is they have a contract with the organization. So my brother and his various back and forth iterations would have a plan with either Lexis or Westlaw, and they would designate what parts of the database they have access to and what parts are part of their contract. Let me rephrase that more accurately. What parts of the database are part of their contract and what parts of the database are not part of their contract. If it's part of their contract, then that means that they don't have to worry too much about the cost because it's within the contract. So what my brother would do, he's a attorney in New Jersey, is he would get the New Jersey state materials. He wouldn't get the New York materials. He certainly wouldn't get the California or Washington state or Idaho materials, but he would get the New Jersey materials. And the same is true for Lexis as well. It goes by contract, and you have what's in your contract and you have what's outside of your contract. So what you were looking at these handouts are the costs for documents that are outside of your organization's contract. So that's why I say every organization is going to be different because they're going to have different contracts. So there are two different ways Westlaw can charge an organization. Or really the organization chooses to be charged. This is the organization's choice. So they can choose hourly, so that's really by the minute, so how long you're logged on to Westlaw looking at the screen, or they can choose transactional. So transactional is by the document viewed. So what that means is you do a search, you get your results, and when you click on your results, that's a charge. Again, that's only for documents outside of your organization's contract. So again, this link is just down here. I don't know that seeing it up there helps any. Probably not, because it's the time. And you get a sense here of what those costs can be. So Vanessa, was it you who said you work for a firm where there's a $21,000? See, it's funny too, because our reps tell us, oh, those are myths. That doesn't really happen. I never believe it. Don't worry. So you are an example of why I don't believe them and proof to you. So you don't take it just from me, someone who works for an actual firm. So what I'm seeing, if you look at secondary sources, and I don't know if it's Lexis or Westlaw, and the prices are going to be very different, but the secondary sources do tend to be what's more expensive. And by downloading the entire treatise, that's not one document, that's probably thousands of documents because it's each section of the treatise. If you think about it, a chapter can have 10 or 20 sections in it. And if you've got 10 chapters, you do the math. And so each section is a document. So looking at secondary content, so if we look at journals, law reviews, practice guides, by documents, $85 per document, which means $85 per section. So there are premium state and specialty titles, which probably is the treatise. I'm just guessing. That's also $85. But think about it, $85. Again, do the math. 85 times one chapter, 10 sections figure is 850, and multiply that by 10. So that's only 8,500. So I'm probably underestimating the number of sections per chapter and chapters per treatise. And it may be one of their super premium titles, which is more than $85 per document. So if you look on page 2, you'll see some of those super premium litigation content. And the price goes up. There's a survey that costs $395 per document. Again, just to give you a sense, and once again, these are titles, these are resources outside of your organization's contract. And if it's hourly, it's per document, which I'm guessing is what the case was in Vanessa's example. If it's, if it's transactional, it's the document. If it's hourly, it's just how long you're logged in. I think though even hourly, there's a per document view charge. But this is where it starts to get complex. And certainly for the purposes of this course, I'm not going to ask you to understand the vagaries of and the complexities. Just have an overall sense. Basically, if you understand this costs lots of money, you will have gotten the most important point. And by understanding this costs lots of money, think about that as you do research. Now, you don't have to for now because, as I said, it's free to all law students. But if you're working at an organization, then you really have to. Any questions? Yeah.
Like she said, her coworker just did now when they charged them. They are the higher. How do you know?
So this piece of advice I will be giving you again toward the end of the semester when we talk about general research advice. And hopefully I will say this piece of advice a bunch of times too. First thing you do, one of the early things you do when you go to work for any legal organization, whether it's for the summer, whether it's during the academic year, and certainly for your full time after you graduate. Find the person in charge of this. It might be the managing partner if it's a small firm like my brother's. You might be lucky enough to have an organization with a librarian, as I keep on saying. Find the person who's in charge of Lexis and Westlaw, whichever one you have, and ask. They will have negotiated that contract, and they will have negotiated very carefully because it's really expensive, and depending upon what you have in your contract is going to determine the price. So that's the answer. Ask. And again, strongly recommend wherever you are working. Now, they may tell you, don't worry about it. Some librarians, especially in larger organizations, librarians will arrange the contract so that the attorneys don't have to worry about it, and they don't want the attorneys to worry about it because of the structure of how the costs work. But they will know that. There's no way for you starting out to know that. Good question. Other questions? So again, it works similarly for Lexis. So you see the document access charges. So one distinction. You not only get charged when you click on a link and look at a document, you get charged again when you email that document to yourself or download it or print it. So there's document access charges and there's document delivery charges. Now, as you see here on Lexis, for some of these documents, it's zero. That's not true for Westlaw. Another thing you get charged for are Shepard's and Keysight. And again, it depends on your plan. It depends on your contract as to how much that is. All these charges, as you can imagine, add up. And again, for purposes of us today, don't worry too much about exactly how it all works and what I would get charged if I did this, that, and the other thing. Understand that you get charged for most of what you do for Lexis and Westlaw. These are for-profit companies. They're trying to make money, and the way they make money is by selling a product to lawyers and charging lawyers money for it. As I mentioned, Bloomberg Law is a flat fee, so that's one big advantage to it. And just again, a reminder, I highly recommend to get a slightly more in-depth understanding than I'm presenting to you now. The extra credit will walk you through a couple of videos for Westlaw, PowerPoint for Lexis that is on the course website and the extra credit page. And I will ask that you complete that by January 28th, which is 2 weeks from now. Okay, so we have come to the end of the material for the day. Again, I am going to ask you for next class, because we will be using all 3 services. Please make sure you have registered successfully for Bloomberg, for Lexis, and I'm guessing you already have it for Westlaw, as you've already said. If you have difficulty with Lexis or Bloomberg, feel free to email me, or the reference librarians at the desk can help you as well. That's part of what we all do at the reference desk, is we help folks register for their accounts. The other thing I want to remind you is to watch the 2 screencasts. Again, that is in the, you go to modules and you go to the secondary sources module, which we will start officially next week. We kind of started this week, and you will see the 2 screencasts, introduction and treatises. Again, I will be sending you a quick announcement, which you should get the email. If that, I'll do that either tonight or first thing tomorrow. When you get it, just reply back. Make sure you reply back to me, to my email address, and just tell me you got it. Thank you all. See you next week.